thank you all for your warm Southern hospitality. It's been wonderful. And my ministry is called Family Renewal. And so I have an emphasis with my ministry on family discipleship, on parenting, on marriage, family life. And I want to talk with you on this topic of how to keep your child in the faith. I think this is a very vital and important issue. I want to run a disclaimer at the beginning here and let you know what I'm not trying to say in this message. I'm not trying to indicate that if you follow a formula or you follow these steps that your children are going to automatically be Christians. They're going to love God. They're going to love people. They're going to make the right choices and do all the right things for the right reasons. I'm not trying to say that because we don't have guarantees as Christian parents. The Bible doesn't teach that, and I'm not trying to emphasize that. However, there have been some studies, there's some research that's come out that has shown us that some things that we can do as parents will incline our children towards the Christian faith, and some things that we do as parents can work against them embracing the Christian faith. So while we don't have guarantees as parents, parenting matters. So one of the things that I want to do first of all is I want to talk about the importance of a biblical worldview. Now I know some of you have heard that term, you may not be familiar with it, may not know what it is. So I want to define biblical worldview for you. It's essentially seeing the world through God's eyes, seeing the world through a certain set of lenses. So a worldview, everyone has a worldview. A worldview would be best described as like a set of lenses through which we see all of life and reality. And our worldview, or these lenses, are informed by our upbringing, by our education, by our parents, by our culture, by the books we read, by the music we listen to. It shapes the way that we see the world. So a worldview is not so much what you believe as much as it is the filter through which you interpret and understand all of life. So a great illustration of that is like if I had on a pair of red tinted sunglasses or blue tinted sunglasses and I was looking at a white screen, I would see that white screen as red or blue because that's my lenses. So when someone sees the world through a new age worldview or a feminist worldview or through a communist worldview or whatever, they see and interpret reality a certain way because of the lenses that they wear. So what we want to do as Christians is we want to be able to see all of life and reality the way that God sees it, because God always sees things accurately. So that's our pursuit. Now, there is a researcher by the name of George Barna who's been researching all things related to the evangelical Christian church for well over 25 years. He's probably the most respected researcher in Christianity. And so he has a series of questions that he asks people on a survey, and he's been doing this for 25 years, but he updates it every 5 years or so. And I want to read to you the questions, or the statements rather, and see if you will affirm these things in your mind. And he says if you will affirm all of these statements, then you have a biblical worldview. Now, I want to say that I don't believe that merely affirming these statements means you have a biblical worldview, because his standard for biblical worldview, in my assessment, is kind of low. You know, he set the bar fairly low. But let me just run through these statements and just give you an idea of what's on the assessment. So he says this: number one, absolute moral truth exists. What this means is that there are some things that are morally right for all people in all places at all times, and there are some things that are morally wrong for all people in all places at all times. So take an example that might be a little extreme, but we would say a murder of an innocent person would always be morally wrong in every situation, under every condition. It's just never acceptable. Now, if you're like, well, I don't know, I can think of a few people that I wouldn't mind, then you wouldn't affirm this statement. You know, if everything is negotiable for you, then you're not going to affirm this statement. But that's premise number one. Number two, the Bible is totally accurate in all of the principles that it teaches. That's number two. Number three, Satan is a real entity or force and not merely symbolic. Number four, a person cannot earn their way to heaven by trying to be good or to do good works. The next one, Jesus Christ lived a sinless life on earth. And then God is the all-knowing, all-powerful creator of the world who still rules the universe today. So not merely did God create everything, but he still holds everything together with his power. And so this is the standard that George Barna has set forth in his survey to ask, do you affirm these things? And he says, if you affirm all of these statements, then you have a biblical worldview. Now, to me, this is essentially just saying you accept the most basic fundamental tenets of evangelical Christianity. I wouldn't say you have a biblical worldview if you affirm these. I would say you basically just affirmed the most fundamental basic statement of faith. To me, having a biblical worldview is that if we're talking about politics or education or law or media and entertainment or any other aspect of culture or life, that you know how to apply Scripture to those areas. You have a biblical philosophy of bioethics. You have a biblical philosophy of every conceivable aspect of life, marriage and family and so on. That's having a biblical worldview, okay? But I want to look at just Barna's definition and say, how are we doing as an evangelical community? Well, in the last 25 years in America, the number of people who will affirm all of those statements has dropped by 50% just in the last 25 years. So Barna says in his report in 2020, a quarter century ago, we had as many as 12% of the adult population holding to a biblical worldview. Since that time, we have seen a steady reduction in the incidence. The current level, just 6%, is literally half of the level when we started calculating this, and it's the lowest result yet. So, if you look at age demographics on this, the younger you are, the less likely you are to embrace a biblical worldview. The American Worldview Inventory, which is a newer study, came out in 2020, and it talked about 18 to 29-year-olds. And it says, regarding the youngest adult generation, the numbers are even more startling. A mere 2% of those 18 to 29 years old possess a biblical worldview. Would you raise your hand if you're in this room and you're 18 to 29? Would you raise your hand if you are the parent or grandparent of someone who is 18 to 29 years old? Okay, think about those demographics. 2% in America will affirm all of those statements that I read. That means 98% will not. So if you are between 18 and 29 and you hold to the most basic tenets of Christianity, you are almost extinct. In fact, Barna did a study and said between 18 to 23-year-olds, if you narrow it down a little bit, it's worse than 2%. It's actually less than 0.5% of the US population. Now you say, well, what does that look like? Well, basically, here's a list of nations who all have more Christian belief among the 18 to 23-year-olds in their country than the United States right now. So you're looking at communist nations, Muslim nations. I mean, Iran, North Korea. You know, I mean, there are more Christians between 18 and 23 years old in these countries that we think of as being anti-Christian, places that are largely Buddhist or atheistic, like Japan. More Christian belief in all of these nations than in the United States among 18 to 23-year-olds. Very disturbing. So why is it that these young people don't have a biblical worldview? Well, part of it is because the predecessing generations have not done well in training them. So only about 21% of evangelical Protestant churches have a biblical worldview, compared to only 1/6 of those attending charismatic or Pentecostal churches, which is about 16%. And of those in mainline denominations, we would call those more liberal Protestant denominations, only 8%. And only 1% of Catholics have a biblical worldview. More disturbing than this, I find that only 51% of America's pastors will affirm all of those statements. So that means that nearly half found fault with something. So I think to myself, what is it exactly that they find problematic. I mean, do half of all Christian pastors think maybe Jesus sinned at some point during his life? I mean, do they think that the Bible isn't accurate in what it teaches? Do they think maybe God didn't create everything? I mean, what exactly do they disagree with on that list? Even more troubling than the fact that there's a lack of Christian belief, there's also a lack of Christian behavior. So Barna, in his book, Think Like Jesus, stated that 98% of professed born-again young people who say, I'm a Christian and I believe in Jesus Christ, do not have Christ-like attitudes or actions. Now, we would call this fruit in their life. They will make a profession of faith. They'll say, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christ follower, I'm a believer, but they live exactly like the world. In terms of their functional life, there's no difference. They don't read their Bibles consistently. They don't obey the commandments of Jesus. They don't share their faith with others. They basically are absorbed in the culture around them. They think like the world. They act like the world. They live like the world. He's saying 98% of those who profess to be born-again Christians. This is hugely problematic. So, what are the beliefs of young people who are attending church today? Of the young people who are still in church today, 65% say they don't believe there's any way to tell which religion is true. 63% don't believe Jesus is the Son of the one true God. 58% believe all faiths teach equally valid truths. 51% don't believe Jesus rose from the dead. 65% don't believe Satan is a real entity. 68% don't believe the Holy Spirit is a real entity. And so as a result, 70%, 7 out of 10 of all young people raised in Christian homes who attend church in their youth leave the Christian faith before their high school graduation. 70%. Barna says that, Lifeway.com says that, and Pew Research says that. 3 independent studies all say 70%, so I think it's fairly accurate. Now, I think about why is it that 7 out of 10 young people are leaving the Christian faith before they graduate high school? Well, they don't buy in ideologically. And I'm going to confess, honestly, that I would not continue to go to church if I didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God, that he lived a sinless life, rose from the dead, and that the Holy Spirit was a real entity. Apparently, for some reason that's baffling to me, there are people who don't believe those things who still go to church. I shouldn't say this because some of you won't like me anymore. I'm not one of those people. I don't participate in church life because I happen to like churchy things. I kind of don't like churchy things. I shouldn't say that, but I just kind of don't. I mean, I like church dinner, like, right? Especially, and I'm not trying to be partial against anybody else's denomination, but I mean Southern Baptists, they know how to make some fried chicken. I'm just saying. So I would still go to the church dinner if I didn't buy in, but I'm not going to do the rest of it. I'm just being honest. I'm just saying. But I think that part of the reason that these young people are not following in Christianity is because they've bailed out intellectually before they finish high school. Now, here's another scary statistic. This is Pew Research. Of the 30% who finish high school and still say, I'm a Christian, of those who attend non-Christian colleges and universities, okay? So you got this 30% who graduate saying, I'm a Christian, I love Jesus, and they go to a non-Christian college or university. An additional 70% of them will deny their Christian faith by the end of their freshman year of college at a Christian university or college, according to Pew Research. So I don't have a pointer, which makes these charts a little bit difficult, but I want to show you some research that's been done by an organization called Nehemiah Institute. Their website is nehemiahinstitute.com. You can get these charts from their website, so I encourage you to go there and look at their information. But they have a biblical worldview assessment test that's called the PEERS test. That's an acronym, and it stands for Politics, Education, Economics, Religion, and Social Issues. And it tests students who are raised in Christian homes And it asks them questions not about what they know about those topics, but about what they believe about those topics. I think it's interesting how much emphasis so many parents put on standardized achievement tests and on how well their students score on standardized achievement tests. But what do standardized achievement tests test students? They test on what the students know. But there are almost no assessment tools that churches or parents use that assess and test students on what they believe. And it is way more important for you as a Christian parent to know what your children believe than to merely know what they know. So you have to have some kind of metric to be able to identify that. So that's what the Pierce test does. So when we look at this chart, you look at the blue line that's tall there at the top. That blue line represents Christian leaders or biblical theologians. So, you think about somebody like Tim Wildman, for example, American Family Association. He's going to be testing pretty high. These Christian leaders, most of them are pretty high. So on this test, I think they're like 85%, something like that they get on this test. Oh, and I should tell you how the test works. It has a plus-minus ratio where you can get a plus 100 or minus 100. And if you get 100% on the test, basically you think like, Jesus and the Apostle Paul. If you get a 0 on the test, to get a 0, you would have to answer, I don't know and I don't care, to every single answer on the test. That would get you a 0. I don't know and I don't care. To get a minus 100, you're basically the devil incarnate. I mean, just, you gotta be a pretty bad person to get a minus 100. Okay, but the range for a biblical worldview is a plus 70 and above. So you don't have to get 100%. I mean, if you get a plus 70 and above, you're in the ballpark, right? So most Christian ministry leaders, most nationally known Bible scholars, they're getting about 85%, something like that. Okay, so you go to the next level, and this is the red bar there. That is Christian school teachers. Okay, now they're getting somewhere around a 50% on this test, which puts them in kind of a moderate Christian worldview category. So nationally, Christian school teachers not doing all that great. The green bar dips below 50%. It's in the range of being called secular humanism, which basically the definition of humanism is man is the measure of all things. So they basically look at the world as man decides for himself what is good and moral and what is true. God is not their standard. So they're in the level of the green bar is Christian school students. So that's the national average for Christian school students is in the secular humanist category. The purple bar next to it are homeschool students, and the homeschool students are almost equal to the Christian school teachers, which is interesting. And then the blue bar, way down there, just like a few percentage points above 0, are students raised in Christian homes who attend public school. And then the orange bar that goes negative is they took out an ad in like the National Atheist magazine, and they asked people to respond. And so this was how readers of like the National Humanist and the National Atheist magazines and people who work for the ACLU and people like, that's how they scored on the test, like a big minus something. Okay, it's just, they did that just to basically make sure that the test results work and that they're accurate. This is another chart that you'll find at nehemiahinstitute.com based on the Pierce test. Okay, so you have that blue line, that's 0 on the test scores. The red going, of course, below, blue going above. There's a bottom line there. Again, I wish I had the pointer, but let's start with the very bottom line. You can see in the last 30 years, this is how long they've been tracking. So from left to right on the screen as you're looking at it, the chart started tracking students 30 years ago till today. You can see that it's declined. You see how it slopes downward? The bottom line are students who are raised in Christian homes who attend public schools. And the line is almost down near 0 now. So basically, nationwide, young people who are attending public schools are basically saying, I don't know and I don't care to almost every question on the test. The line that is above it runs exactly parallel to it, just a few percentage points above it. Can you see the orange line right above? That is Christian school students. And they're scoring, just 12%, something like that. So they're actually in a really anti-Christian perspective in their overall worldview. The green line that's over towards the right has been tracked a shorter period of time. The tracking doesn't go back as far. Those are homeschool students, and they're somewhere around the 50% mark. And then the very top line is a very odd category of Christian schools whose entire focus is to do biblical worldview and apologetics training for students at every subject, at every grade level. There's like less than 100 of these in the entire United States. So it's less than 1% of all Christian schools, and it's such a small percentage point that it kind of doesn't factor in. But it does show that intentionality of schools who say, we're teaching you to defend the Christian faith at every subject, every grade level. Those schools actually are putting their students at about a 70% baseline for biblical worldview. So I talked to Dan Smithwick, who's the creator of this test, and I said, why do you think we're seeing this decline over 30 years in Christian schools? And he said there's a whole litany of reasons for that, of why the biblical worldview is sloping so much in Christian schools. But he said one of the reasons is because of the fact that Christian schools are very expensive now. So you look at the economics of what gets spent per student in the different school models. Government schools, on average, nationwide, spend $12,500 per year per student. That's an awful lot of money. You often hear, public schools are free. Well, no, they're not free. Somebody has to pay for it, and it's actually us, the tax dollars, pay for it, to the tune of $12,500 per year per student. And in terms of biblical worldview output, I mean, you saw them down at the, almost down at the zero right now on the biblical worldview assessment score. Christian schools, however, the average tuition is now $8,600 per year per student. That's national average. He said because the cost is so high, parents are putting pressure on the schools to have all of these teachers accredited, and specifically accredited in the subject in which they teach. And so they said, it turns out that in order for you to get accredited, a lot of times these teachers go to universities and teachers' colleges that are the most leftist, progressive, anti-Christian, liberal schools on the planet. And in order to get your certification, you have to graduate and be rubber stamped that you studied the information, you understood the information, and you gave the right answer. Does that make sense? So basically they're getting deep fried in socialism and in humanism, but they love Jesus. Right? So what's the litmus test for the Christian school on who they decide to hire? Do you sign our statement of faith? Well, your statement of faith says, I believe Jesus died on the cross for my sins and that I'm going to go to heaven when I die, right? They'll sign that, but they think like Marxists, and they're pro-LGBTQ. I have a friend who just got fired from a Christian school in Atlanta because they were teaching cultural Marxism in the classroom, and he went to the principal and questioned it and just got instantly fired. This happened a month ago. They're increasingly teaching critical race theory, social justice, intersectionality, and this is an ACSI, which is the largest association of Christian schools in the United States. So this woke theology is coming into the Christian schools. In fact, the Christian school where my friend got fired for Black History Month, they picked two heroes that they wanted the students to study. One was a Black Muslim woman, and the other was a Black woman who calls herself a womanist, which I'm not even sure what that is, but I think it's some sort of feminist, and neither one of them were Christian. Both of them had an anti-Christian worldview. I'm thinking, well, if you're going to do Black history, why not pick one of the many Christian heroes of the faith? Why pick a Muslim and a feminist, a womanist? I apologize if I'm ignorant. I don't know the distinction. Somebody can correct me later. But this is what's being taught for $8,600 a year in Christian school. Now, here's what happens. Parents send their children to these Christian schools. And I know this is the mantra in every government school. It's the mantra in every Christian school. Yeah, but our school's different. Everywhere I've ever gone or in the United States, people say, oh yeah, the schools, they're a mess, all kinds of problems. Yeah, the nation's schools are a mess, but our school's great. We don't have any problem. We have no drugs. We have no problem, no sin. We have Bible studies in every class, prayer, repentance, revival. It's great. Our school's different. I'm just saying somebody's school somewhere is teaching this stuff. So, that's another thing. So this humanistic worldview is coming into the curriculum. And I always say this about schools too. You have 3 teachers in any school, right? You have the person who stands up front and says, I'm a teacher. You have the textbook, which is also a teacher. And then you have the teachers who really teach and who have the real impact on the students. That's the peer group. Come on. And you're going to have that in any classroom. So what you have to do as a parent is you can't assume, oh, well, I'm paying $8,600 a year. They're giving my kid a biblical worldview. I hope. I spoke in a chapel at a large Christian school. Had 500 kids in chapel. These teenagers came up to me afterward. I spoke on biblical worldview and apologetics. And they came up to me afterward and said, what's that word you use, Apollo something? I said, apologetics. They're like, we've never heard that before. So I went from chapel to the principal and talked to him and met with him. He's like, yeah, we're a good biblical worldview school. I was like, well, I don't know what you mean by that, but your students don't even know what apologetics is. And then the biology teacher pulled me aside. He goes, when you're here, you're going to hear a lot about how we're a biblical worldview school. What that means is we're not. He goes, most of the people on staff here have no idea what that means. They just know it sells, so they use the term. So what I'm going to say to you is you can't assume just because you're paying a lot of money that they're teaching a biblical worldview. In fact, my friend Dan, who does this Pierce test, he had a big account with a big Christian school, nationally known ministry. I won't mention them, big mega church. They brought him in, and they had 2,000 students that he was going to test. And he's like, this is a big account. He's real excited about it. He said, I made the biggest mistake of my life. He said, I said, hey, I got an idea. Before we test the students, let's test the faculty. And they said, oh, that's a good idea. He said, the faculty scored 30%. That put them somewhere between like socialist and secular humanist. And then the school said, oh, there's something wrong with your test. We're not going to use it on the students. He's like, I was so stupid. Why did I do that? Lost that account. Anyway, of the young people who are still in church today, I'm not talking about the ones who have left the building. Because people tell me, well, hey, I go to my church, I look around, there's young people, children, teenagers. Our church is packed with young people. But the Beamer Group is a research group that was hired by Ken Ham from Answers in Genesis to do some research on young people who are still in the church. And they found that of the young people who are still in the church, 2/3, 66% say, I'm only in church because my parents make me go. And as soon as I have the opportunity to leave, I will leave and I will not come back. So in their hearts and minds, they've already left the building, but their bodies are still there because they're not old enough yet. And again, all those other statistics I gave you earlier from Pew Research, Lifeway, and Barna, 70% actually do end up leaving. Okay, so this is fascinating. I'm 46 now, and I just moved into the stage of trifocals. And it's weird with trifocals because you can't see with them and you can't see without them. I know. It's Jason Lyle told us all about it. It's the fall, man. If you don't believe in the fall, all you got to do is turn 46. Everything falls. I'm just saying it's not good. So of those, of the thousands, this is back to the Beamer Group, of the 1,020 to 29-year-old evangelicals surveyed who attended church regularly, but no longer do, 96%, I think it is, of them attended church regularly during their elementary and middle school years. 55% attend church regularly during high school. And of the 1,000, only 11% were still going to church during their early college years. Only 11% of young people who are going to college, according to Beamer Group, are active in church. Some of them cycle back later, thank God. And for those of you who have wayward young people, don't give up on them. You keep praying for them. You keep reaching out to them. You don't have to affirm their sin to love them and affirm them. You can express your love without, diving in the pig pen with them. You know, the prodigal son, his dad didn't go out there and swim in the pig pen with him. You know, you don't have to do that, but you can love them, and God often brings those back. So when did they begin to doubt? So those who have expressed doubts about Christianity, about 40% said they first started having their doubts in middle school. 43.7% said they had their first doubts in high school. And 10.5% said they had their first doubts during college. So we're losing them not in college, we're losing them in middle school and in high school. That's when they bail out on Christianity. And what is it, parents, you know, most parents are not discipling their own children. Who are they expecting to do it for them? The church. They're expecting the church to do it. Well, let me tell you something, folks. That's not getting it done, right? You know, between kindergarten and 12th grade, your child will spend 10,800 hours at a minimum. Every state's a little different, has different requirements. At a bare minimum, 10,800 seat hours of instruction in a school away from you. That people you barely know are working on your child's little mind. That is a powerful influence that cannot be underestimated. And then when they come home from school, sociologists tell us that they spend 7.5 hours every day after school in digital multimedia. And it's worse than that because they're multitasking. They're tapping into 2 information streams at the same time. So they're watching television and they're texting their friends, or they're on Facebook listening to their iPod. Barna says only 2% of Christian youth actually have a different media palette than their non-Christian friends. So it's not Christian input that they're getting when they plug into these multimedia channels. So it's 10.5 hours of digital media content every day compressed into a 7.5 hour time block after school because of multitasking. So you add that together, 7.5 hours a day in school, 7.5 hours a day in multimedia. You're looking at 15 hours a day of anti-Christian indoctrination. 85% of all evangelical Christians send their children to an anti-Christian government school. And let me tell you something, those schools are not religiously neutral. It's the biggest deception today. Well, they're just teaching random facts that are neutral facts. They're not. They're teaching a belief system that excludes God. They're teaching a belief system that is anti-God. So you have, between multimedia, entertainment, and school, you have 25,000 hours between kindergarten and 12th grade. And what's the remedy for that? Parents are like, well, I'm gonna have my kid in an hour of Sunday school and an hour of youth group when they get older. So you think an hour of Veggie Tales on Sunday morning and an hour of pizza party on Friday night, that's gonna somehow tip the scale and counterbalance 25,000 hours of anti-Christian indoctrination? Let me tell you, folks, not only will it not work, we have evidence that for the last 40 years, this has been the approach of the Christian church, it's gotten worse. You saw the slide on that chart. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. And what's the solution that the denominational leaders are coming up with? Well, you know what we need to do is we need to do what we've been doing, we just need to do more of it. Keep sending our kids to atheist schools. Keep letting our kids get saturated in anti-Christian media. You know, if we just do more of that, we'll get a different result. That's insanity. If you want to get a different result, you're going to have to make a different decision. If you are on a train headed south and your intent is that you want to go north, and let me just tell you what we're doing right now with this anti-Christian indoctrination of our youth, it's a train going south. Been going that way for a long, long time. What I see these Christian parents and these church leaders doing is saying, well, what we need to do, we want to go north. So they are running as fast as they know how in a northerly direction on a southbound train and thinking that's going to get them north. It won't. If you want to go north, you got to get off the train that's going south and you got to find a train that's going north. Now, that's difficult because that actually takes some investment and that's painful. So let me show you a study that came out a few years back. There's a study called the Gen 2 survey, GEN, and then the number 2 and survey. I want you guys to Google this, Gen 2 survey. There's a whole PDF document that you can download for free, Gen 2 survey. This is one slide from the whole study. This is the largest study of churched millennials ever. Over 10,000 young people raised in church who are in that millennial generation, born between 1978 and 2000. And what we were looking for, I was part of a conference that was held at the Creation Museum with Dr. Albert Mohler from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, Ken Ham from Answers in Genesis, Dr. Jeff Myers from Summit Ministries, Dr. Brian Ray from National Home Education Research Institute, a number of other Christian leaders. And what we were looking for was like inputs and outcomes. Again, there are no guarantees in parenting. It's not like baking a cake, where you put in, you put in these ingredients and you bake it for 15 minutes and out pops the predictable product. That's not how parenting works. But there are things that we can do that statistically will incline our children towards the Christian faith, and there are things that we can do that will incline them against the Christian faith. Okay, so the top purple bar, those are things that are outcomes. Those are things that we're hoping to see. The green lines on the left column, those are inputs. So the green lines are inputs, the purple bar is outcomes, okay? So let's start from left to right on the purple bar. So the first one is biblical orthodoxy. That means that you have made a profession of faith and that you are basically adhering to a biblical statement of faith, okay? The next one is Christian behavior as adults. Does your lifestyle match up with your profession? The next one is Christian beliefs as adults. That has more to do with biblical worldview, like a more fully orbed biblical worldview. Not just I agree with a statement of faith, but that you know how to think biblically. The next one is satisfaction in life as adults. The next one is community civic involvement. And then beliefs similar to fathers and beliefs similar to mothers. It turns out also that if a child believes similarly to their mom and dad, that they also tend to have a good relationship with mom and dad. So these are all good outcomes, right? We want them to have a biblical profession of faith. We want them to have Christian behavior, biblical worldview, be actively involved in their community as adults, have satisfaction in life, community involvement, beliefs similar to dad, beliefs similar to mom. So there are metrics, there are inputs that contribute positively to all of these outcomes, and there are inputs that contribute negatively, okay? So let's look at the first one. Strong relationship with father. And we looked at the early years and the later years, because the question was, which is more important for a child to have a relationship with his father in the early years or in the later teen years? Turns out, equally important. Both are important. And then we looked at relationship with mother. That's the next line. So we then wanted to find out, okay, so which parental relationship is more important? Is relationship with mom more important for these outcomes, or relationship with dad more important? Good question, right? Can you believe that the results show that both are equally important? Surprise, surprise. God knew what he was talking about. And so the relationship with mom and dad in the early years and the later years, you see those green pluses? That means positive all across the board, hugely positive. When young people have a good, close relationship with mom and dad in the early years and the later years, hugely positive. Okay, the next input was attending church at an early age. And then the next one under that is attending church at a older age, like the teen years. So we wondered, is it more important for young people to be in church when they're younger, or more important for them to be in church when they're teenagers? Turns out that both are important. The only real uptick was that when young people were involved deeply in church life in their teen years, they had more satisfaction in life as adults than if they had less church attendance. And again, this is actually talking about incorporating the young people into the whole life of the church, not merely sending them down the hall to a segmented room down there where you go to the little people's church. They have to integrate with the entire church and get to know older people, get to know adults, to have people who can be mentors, who can disciple them. This is so important. I think we've done the church a great disservice by sending children out of the context of the main body, and then they grow up and they don't even know the adults in the church. Proverbs 13:20 says, if you walk with wise people, you'll become wise, but a companion of fools will be destroyed. So you want your children to have wise people within the body who can come along and supplement and help with this process of parenting and with discipleship. And these are, older people in the church. They need to get to know those people too, not just their peers. Okay, so then we know these two metrics or these two inputs are important. Relationship with mom and dad, church attendance, and no church is perfect, but having your children in the best Bible-believing church that you know of is so important, is so essential. Okay, so the next metric, we start to look now at schooling choices. Are there differences in terms of these outcomes based on what type of academic environment you have your children in? The first one we look at is homeschool. It's that bottom row of green lines. You'll see it very positive. What we found is that these three things put together create like a three-legged stool. You can't sit on a two-legged stool. It doesn't work. But we found when these things are done together in tandem, close relationship with mom and dad, having your children in the best Bible teaching church that you know, and home discipleship. And I don't just say homeschool, because it's not just about, teaching them academics at home. It's about using the home as a context where you disciple your children into the Christian faith. That's what I'm talking about. That kind of thing is extremely successful. Those three put together, extremely positive all the way across the board. Okay, that first line there where you see negative to orthodoxy, negative to Christian behavior, negative to Christian beliefs, negative to, neutral on satisfaction in life, negative on satisfaction, let's see, what is that? Yeah, negative on satisfaction in life, neutral on community civic involvement, and negative towards beliefs being similar to moms and dads. That's Christian school. I think I read one of those wrong. Oh, the only positive was slight uptick on civic and community involvement. That was the only plus of $8,600 a year of Christian schools nationally. Now, let me just share with you, this is not my opinion. Because I know I see, even though it's dark out there, I still see your faces and I feel the anger. This is not my opinion. This is the largest study of churched millennials ever, and I didn't do it, okay? I'm just giving you the information that parents are spending a boatload of money, and almost across the board, you see that Christian schools nationally are negative to Christian belief, negative to Christian behavior, negative to biblical worldview, negative to satisfaction in life, and negative towards relationship with mom and dad. I find that disturbing, personally. The next line, second from the bottom, are secular private schools. Negative pretty much across the board. And then the more bars that you have, that means more negative or more positive. More green pluses means more positive, and then more negative marks means more negative. This is young people raised in Christian homes who attend government schools. Hugely negative all the way across in every single category, including community and civic involvement. This is the argument against homeschooling. They say, well, homeschooling, they won't grow up and be positive citizens. They won't be engaged because they won't not properly socialize. They're not going to know how to interface with other people in the community. It turns out that the most negative social experience that you can give your kids in terms of their outcome as adults, and if you want them to be positively engaged in civic and community involvement, is actually government schooling. They'll get the worst socialization and be the worst socialized of anybody as an adult if they go to public school. That's a little counterintuitive, but that's what Gen 2 survey shows. There's another study that indicates that. It's called Homeschooling Grows Up. It's done by Dr. Brian Ray of the National Home Education Research Institute. You can go to nheri.org, look for Homeschooling Grows Up. It's a study of 7,000 homeschooled graduates. Shows that homeschoolers are actually more positively socially engaged in their communities and in community service than private school and public school students. So there's a fourth leg that you can add to your three-legged stool to make a four-legged chair, okay? So if you add one more component to close relationship with mom and dad in the early years and the later years, church attendance in the early years and the later years, and homeschooling, if you do this fourth thing, Your children are 90% more likely to be believers, 98% more likely to be stronger in Christian behavior, and 122% more likely to be stronger in Christian beliefs. That is, if you give your children systematic biblical worldview and apologetics training in their K-12 years, than just doing those other three things alone. So you add this to those other three things, statistically, your children are extremely likely to be in the Christian faith, have a strong biblical worldview, have satisfaction in life, be positively engaged in their communities, have beliefs that are similar to mom and dad, and to have close relationship with mom and dad. Now, am I saying if you do all of these things, you are guaranteed that your children will love Jesus, have a biblical worldview, love and serve others? No, I'm not saying that. Because, again, you don't have guarantees as parents. But what we do matters. Now, we don't do the things that I'm recommending here because statistically, research seems to indicate that these things will bring the outcome that we're looking for. That's not why we do these things. We do these things because, surprise, surprise, having a close relationship with your children, having them in a Bible teaching church, you taking full responsibility for the discipleship of your own children, and you teaching them how to defend the Christian faith are actually all things taught in the Bible. That's why we do it. We do it out of obedience, not because we're chasing research. But it's interesting to find out that the research supports and affirms the things that the Scripture teaches us that we should be doing as Christian parents. And that the research does not support sending our children away from us for other people to raise our children. Because the Bible never tells you to do that. Now, if you find passages and people say, well, yeah, but look at Samuel. They sent him away. Okay, like, they literally sent him away and he did not live with the family anymore. I don't think that's prescriptive for us as Christian families, okay? There was one exception, and they're like, well, you know, what about Daniel and his friends? They got sent away to Babylon. Whoa. Okay, like the parents didn't send the kids off to Babylon. God was punishing the nation for disobedience. Their children were taken as slaves and all the males were castrated. So this is not a good argument for sending your children away from you for other people to raise your kid. You know, there are things that the Scripture teaches us to do, and it teaches us that we are supposed to be responsible for discipling our children. If you do a study on what the Bible teaches about teaching, instruction, I've actually done this, I have a whole book on it. What the Bible teaches on teaching, instruction, education, what it says in there, there's not one verse in the entire Bible where God ever tells the civil government to raise a child. 1 Peter 2, Romans 13 says they're to bear the sword to punish evildoers. That's what they're supposed to do. Nothing about, nursing a baby, giving them a bottle, singing to them lullabies at night, tucking them in, reading them bedtime stories, teaching them their numbers and shapes and colors, and teaching them how to read and how to write and how to do civics and history and geography. God didn't, fact check me. Please, fact check me. But there are no passages in the Bible that say the civil government's supposed to teach your children. That's a really new and novel idea. In fact, you will find that concept not in the Bible, but you will find it in the Communist Manifesto. I'm just going to throw that out there. Karl Marx in the Manifesto says, we must replace home education with the state. Fact check me on that. Direct quote from the Communist Manifesto. So that idea comes not from the Bible, it comes from Karl Marx. And it's not working. It's not working. Well, here's another. This is shocking. This will blow your mind. There's not one verse in the New Testament where God ever commands the church to teach a child. Fact check me on that one too. Not one verse. We've built this whole multi-million-dollar industry around the church teaching children. Not only is there not one verse where the Bible ever commands them to teach, and I'm talking about as a subculture, as a separate group. They were taught in the context of the church. They were taught as part of the body, but not as a sectioned off subculture. Not only is there no command in the New Testament to do it, there's not one example in the New Testament where the early church ever did it. So where do we get some of these ideas that we practice in the church?
Where do we get these ideas? I go into a lot of churches. I speak in a lot of churches. I go into these mega churches, and I walk down the hallway, and I see 5th grade class, 6th grade class, 7th grade class. Just help me out, because I've studied the Bible quite a bit. Where's 7th grade class in the Bible? I mean, is that like Old Testament, New Testament? Is that Galatia? I'm trying to remember. Where's 7th grade class? Where do we get the idea of a 7th grade class? Oh, we got it from the public school system. Right, that's where we got that idea. Didn't get it from the Bible. Now, here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying it's wrong for the church to supplement what the parents are trying to do at home, but that's not what's happening. It is not the church's job to disciple your child. And it sure is not the government's job to disciple your child. But 85% of all evangelical Christians send their children to be discipled by an anti-Christian government school system. 85%. And they'll defend it to the death, especially in the South. You know, I have a friend, he says, you got to stop talking about that stuff in the South. He says, because what they hear in the South is, you hate my grandma. I said, but I hate their grandma. Well, yeah, that's what they hear. They're like, but my grandma's a school teacher, and you hating on my grandma. I'm like, no, I'm not talking about your grandma. Your grandma's a wonderful person. She probably makes great brownies, and I would love her. I'm not down on grandma. What I'm talking about is, what does the Bible prescribe? What does the Bible teach? Does it teach you to send your children away from you for an anti-Christian government school to raise your child to the tune of 10,800 hours between kindergarten? You go, well, yeah, but we got to send our children into those schools to be salt and light. All right. Here's how salt and light argument goes. You're a good Christian parent. You have this good Christian child, right? Your good Christian child needs to go into the school because there's these bad kids over here. They don't know Jesus. Your good Christian child needs to go over here and convert all these non-Christian heathens to become like Jesus, right? Salt and light argument. The logic is this. You're a good Christian parent, you have a good apple. Over here, there's a barrel of bad apples. You need to take your good apple, you throw your good apple into the barrel of bad apples, your good apple is gonna make all those bad apples turn good. Now you show me one study anywhere on this planet that shows that that's working. I've read all of them. I've studied all of them. There are 0 studies that show that that approach works. Now, I'm not saying that onesie-twosies, that a student doesn't influence another student to Christ. That happens, praise God for that. But I'm saying you show me any study that shows that that trajectory works, it doesn't. We're losing 70% of our young people leave the Christian faith before high school graduation. And of those who make it through 12 years of government schooling and then that go to higher education in a non-Christian college or university and come out on the other side, only 9% still hold to the most basic tenets of Christianity, only 9%. I have 11 children. And I realize that clap was for my wife. But I have 11 children, and I just think statistically, from a biblical worldview standpoint, let's just round it to 10 to make it easier. Which 9 of my 10 kids do I want to lose to the world? Stakes are high, people. Stakes are high. God didn't tell somebody else to disciple your child, he told you to. All right, you want to learn how to do that? I have a book that's brand new. It's called Raising Them Up, Parenting for Christians. It teaches you how to get your child's heart, how to keep your child's heart, how to disciple them, how to give them a biblical worldview. This is the big picture, the 30,000-foot view of Christian parenting. I'm going to tell you I didn't bring enough books. In fact, I'm almost sold out, and thank you for those that have already purchased. I appreciate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to direct you mostly to my website. My ministry is called Family Renewal. Our website is familyrenewal.org, and I want to give you a promo code to get free shipping. So it'll be the same as if you buy here. familyrenewal.org, use the promo code free shipping. So when you place your order, it'll give you free shipping. Isn't that intuitive? I came up with that this morning. I was like, my wife wasn't even here to help me with it. I was like, I think that works. So some people go, well, some people say, well, I'll just go to Amazon and buy it. 2 clicks, it'll be delivered to my house. You can do that. I appreciate that. But let me just share with you the dirty secret of Christian publishing. If you buy a $10 book on Amazon, one of my books, as an author, I get royalties from the book. I make 65 cents on that book if you buy it on Amazon for $10. Amazon keeps almost all of it. That's why they own the world, okay? I'm just gonna tell you, Amazon, they're doing okay. They will be fine, they're gonna be okay. I have 11 kids, so I'm just saying. So order from FamilyRenewal.org, the Feed the Hungry Children Fund. Use the free shipping promo code. This book, Education, Does God Have an Opinion? A biblical apologetic for Christian education and homeschooling. This is, I think, the most comprehensive book on the market for a biblical philosophy of education. Most Christians, when they think about education, they draw from 2 sources. Their experience, how they were raised, their school experience, and culture, what everybody around them does. And that's what drives them. Well, this is what everybody else that I know does. This is how I was raised. Let me tell you, do you think that culture could ever be wrong about anything? Do you think your experience could ever mislead you? I'm gonna say we shouldn't be driven as Christians by culture and experience. We should be driven by theology. I know almost no Christians who have a biblical theology of education. They think the Bible doesn't say anything about education. Oh, au contraire. I don't know what that means in the South. I think it means something like, ain't so. And so I want to encourage you to read this book because I think this book will radically change your mind in terms of thinking, what does the Bible actually say about education? Because this is a lot. It's just that we don't hear it. People don't teach on it. For those of you who are interested in looking into the home education option, Answers for Homeschooling, the top 25 questions critics ask, this literally answers all your questions. What about socialization? Well, what about academics? What about high school? What about college? What about the salt and light issue? How do I know I'm qualified? I don't have enough patience to homeschool. How can we afford to homeschool? In fact, I told you $12,500 a year in government schools, $8,600 in private schools. The average cost for homeschooling a child is $660 a year. And homeschoolers academically score 30% higher than their governmentally schooled counterparts on standardized achievement tests for $660 a year. That's pretty efficient. So this book will answer every question you have. How to choose a curriculum. Every question you could possibly have on homeschooling is in this book. This book, we actually named it right for Tupelo, because you know what this means. I've told the title of this book, Pitching a Fit, up north, and people say, what does that mean? But you all know what this means. And basically, the subtitle is Overcoming Angry and Stressed Out Parents, because I've been doing conference speaking since 1995. So this is my 27th year. Started when I was a baby. And I have found that there are 2 kinds of parents. There are those who struggle with anger and stress, and those who lie. So you need to decide which one you want to be. And this book is universally relevant. And then finally, these books, Questions God Asks and Questions Jesus Asks. This is a Bible study through the Old Testament based on 20 questions that God asked people in the Old Testament. And I found that to be a fascinating concept because one of the doctrines we know to be true of God is He's omniscient. He knows all things. And yet when I was doing my study through the Old Testament, I kept noticing times where God would ask people questions. Like He asks Balaam, who are these men with you? And He asks Abraham, where is your wife Sarah? And He asks Moses, what's in your hand? And He asks Elijah in the cave, what are you doing here? And so I started wondering, why is God asking people questions? So I started to outline every time I saw one of those questions and to write down the topic. And then I thought about Jesus and how Jesus was really the master of asking questions. And I love how when Jesus was asked and confronted, with different difficult questions, He would often respond not with an answer, but with a question. Good teacher, What good thing must I do to inherit eternal life? Why do you call me good? And so there's 39 different chapters between the two, 39 completely different topics. It's like a systematic theology course that goes through just based on these questions that God asked and that Jesus asked. I have some of these still, USB drives. There's about almost 75 hours of audio and video teaching that I've done over the many years of conference speaking on family life, on parenting, on marriage, on education, on biblical worldview, on apologetics, on Christian living. Lots and lots of video and audio. So if you like to listen, you like to watch video, this USB drive is, if you bought it on our website, all the downloads, it would be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Conference special here is $40 for the USB stick, 8 gigabyte USB stick. And then we have a few book bundles here. I think I have 4 left. All 6 books for $60. You save almost $20 if you buy the whole set. This is not available on the website. I apologize for that. But we'll sell out what we have here. And then some of the books, again, if you want to buy them here, I can fill out an order sheet and ship them to you for free. But it would be easier for me if you're willing to go to familyrenewal.org and purchase them there. So again, my ministry is Family Renewal. And we have a free podcast if you like podcasts. Anybody like podcasts? Just look up Family Renewal. So add that to subscribe to that. You can also go to YouTube and subscribe and watch some video podcasts. You can watch the one that Will and I did on racism, and the Christian, as well as a lot of other great podcasts. I have a business card on my table out there. If you pick up the one that has the QR code, you can get a free audio download of your choice from my website. Just scan the QR code, get the promo code. Again, we'll run out of those, but grab those. Also, final thing, social media. I'm on every social media platform. So whatever you do, I post mostly on Facebook, but I'm on everything. So just look up Israel Wayne, look up Family Renewal, and I'd love to keep in touch with you. So thank you. God bless you.